That's right. That's right.
Yeah, that
All right.
would have sounded bad, wouldn't it?
Let's do this. Lewis shifts to Christian behavior in book 3. And begins a conversation in chapter 1 about the 3 parts of morality. In many people's minds, morality means something that interferes with or stops a good time. In reality, moral rules are directions for running the human machine, is what C.S. Lewis says, to prevent strains, frictions, and breakdowns. At first, when we're learning to use our human machines, the rules may go against our natural inclinations. However, in the long run, every moral failure will cause future problems. So by talking about rules and obedience instead of preferential ideals or idealism, we will better remind ourselves of what is at stake. So in the 3rd paragraph, and for those of you that have not had English in a long time, every time there's an indentation, that's a new paragraph.
I know that.
Okay, there you go. So
Just
Well,
you-
well, except in books where you've got a double space between the
there you
paragraphs.
go. There you go.
I know what a
Well,
paragraph.
anyway, just wanted, So the 3rd paragraph, use the fleet of ships and the band analogies to explain the 2 ways the human machines go wrong. All right, so how do they go wrong?
If they collide and get in one another's way.
Okay,
If they break down and get in one another's way.
that's
Yeah.
right.
And about the individual inside ourselves.
Right, right. Are we running into, or like different instruments in a band playing at the wrong time, right? Now, yeah, then the individual, something goes wrong within a ship, or you get 2 flat tires within 5 days, which is what I've done this week.
Oh, my God.
But what it does is if something goes wrong within a ship, Lewis says it makes it unseaworthy, or like a band instrument be out of tune. Now, there is also a 3rd way. That's the next paragraph.
Mhm.
Okay. Use those same analogies explaining a 3rd thing that needs to be taken into account about the human machine.
Inside more.
What is?
Where we're trying to get to.
Yeah, the purpose, so the overriding reason for what they do. Where the fleet is trying to go, or what song the band is trying to play. Okay, so that's all there. That's good. Okay. So then, I think we're pretty much there in the 3 parts of morality. Fair play between individuals, tidying up, just kind of thinking about it, tidying up or harmonizing things within each individual, within ourselves, and then the general purpose of the individual as a whole. So those are the 3 ways in which the machine, the human machine, can go wrong, according to C.S. Okay. Now, in paragraph 6, okay, all right.
Or 3 paragraphs further.
Thank you, John. Which of these 3 parts do most modern people usually acknowledge and not disagree much about? Now, there's one that they agree with, really. Which one?
Fair play.
Fair play between individuals. Most people, there's no disagreement that we should have fair play between individuals or social morality, that there should be some kind of social morality. That's good. That's good. Now, why is the 2nd part also important? And you find that the same paragraph and then in the next one. The next part is important. He says this because we are deceived
Yeah.
if we do not recognize the impact that things amiss within an individual, such as greed, cowardice, conceit, or bad temper, are psychological dysfunctions that will have on society as a whole. That those things that are happening within us will have negative effects on society. So that's important for us to remember. Okay. Let's looking down further down the page, paragraphs 8 and 9. What are some of the reasons Lewis cites for the 3rd part of morality also being important? The general purpose of the individuals. Let's just look together at that. What does he say here? He says different beliefs about the universe lead to different behavior. Now, do you find that to be true? I think
No
so.
argument.
One believes himself to be the landlord of his own ship. I like that. Mind and body. He will not avail himself to God's purposes. On the other hand, recall that Christianity asserts every human individual is going to live forever. Right? If this is true, even if a state or nation lasts 1,000 years, the individual is still not only more important, but incomparably more important. That's an interesting statement. The significance is this, whereas my bad temper, I always love C.S. Lewis puts his stuff out there. I mean, he really does. Whereas my bad temper may not be much to bother about if I'm going to only live, say, 70 years. In 1,000,000 years, it could gradually become an absolute hell. Because it's one of Lewis's things. We are always in the process of becoming. He said we're either becoming more and more a saint or more and more of a devil. It never stops. He says, you know, if we're still alive after we die, if we believe that, that process of becoming is still happening.
Yeah,
That's-
Paul said that too.
Yeah, he did. It's interesting to think about. The last question for chapter 1. I don't have a paragraph number for you.
10.
There you go. If we're to think about morality, we must think about all 3 parts. Maybe this is more a statement. We must, relations between man and man, things within a man. Sorry, ladies, it's 1940, whatever.
It's okay, we're good.
All right, relations between humans, things within human, there you go, that's better. Things within humans and the relation between human beings and the powers that made us. If you think deeply enough about this, you'll realize that the biblical names for the 3 parts of morality are faith, hope, and love. If you have to think about it. Okay, it really is faith, hope, and love. So I think that's important for us there. Any questions, comments, rebuttals, additions? Any of that? All right. We're just breezing right along. Y'all are talkative today. All right.
I know.
I know. Let's move to the cardinal virtues. This is sure to help us get some conversation going here. This one wasn't broadcast over the air because of time, but this was added later to the book. Okay. Instead of 3 parts, Lewis divides morality the way older writers did into 7 parts or 7 virtues. 4 of them, he says, prudence, temperance, justice, and fortitude are called cardinal, which has, as he says in the book, absolutely nothing to do with the idea of a Roman Catholic cardinal. Okay, so there's that. But what cardinal means is simply pivotal. Pivotal virtues. So prudence, temperance, justice, and fortitude are cardinal virtues, while he says the other 3, the ones we just talked about, faith, hope, and love, charity, hope, and faith, he calls it charity, are called theological virtues. All right. And actually says we're going to get to that later in later chapters. So let's focus on these. What is prudence? It's paragraph 4, by the way. For those of you that are
Common
Practical
sense.
common sense
Yeah.
It's not very common.
anymore. That's true.
Not sure it ever was.
You know, common sense of taking the
Thanks,
trouble to think out what you're going to do, what you're doing, and what the consequences will be.
Mhm.
Yeah, so prudence. Many Christians today have the idea that provided you are good, it does not matter being a fool. They have twisted
Good
Christ.
fool.
Yeah, right.
I
They
can
have
name a
twisted-
few names.
Yep, I've got a few on, yeah. They have twisted Christ's saying about getting into his kingdom by being like children, which Paul flatly refutes, excuse me. While we are to be as gentle as doves, we are also to be as wise as serpents. We forget that one sometimes.
Mhm.
That's from Jesus. As Lewis states, he wants a child's heart. Jesus wants a child's heart, but a grown-up head. And that's a funny image to think of, a little heart and a big head, but that's what he says. So that's prudence. What about temperance? What is temperance?
Moderation in all things.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's equated, as he says, with teetotalism.
Yay, Carrie Nation. Disciples of Christ strike again. Oh,
That's right.
Shush up.
See,
Dan.
that's right. That's where it came from. That's right. But originally, it was not a reference specifically to alcohol, but to all pleasures, whatever they were and whatever they are. Additionally, it did not mean abstaining, but it meant temperance means going the right distance and going no farther. Okay,
Moderation.
right, moderation. Yeah, moderation. There are certain times when abstinence may be appropriate, but Lewis notes that one mark of a certain type, I love this sentence, of a certain type of bad man is that he cannot give up a thing himself without wanting everyone else to give it up. So if I can't do it, you
Yeah,
can't do
no.
it. Yeah. That's right. So there you go. That's temperance. All right. So, hey, what about justice? How does he define justice? So, let's see here, justice.
Fairness.
Yes.
Mhm.
It's the old word for everything we mean by fairness,
Mhm.
including honesty, truthfulness, keeping promises. It means more than what goes on in a court of law. So yeah, I think that's good. And finally, fortitude. What is fortitude?
Keep on,
Courage,
keep
guts,
on.
and
It's two kinds of
perseverance.
courage. Right, the kind that faces danger and the kind that endures pain.
Mhm.
Now, there's a note here in my study guide. Courage is not the absence of fear, but perseverance in its presence.
Mhm.
That even though you're fearful, you keep going. Okay. All right. All right. So Lewis makes a distinction here between, and this is paragraphs 8 and 9 for those of you that are still counting paragraphs.
I'm lost already.
Lewis makes a distinction between a person doing some virtuous act, all right, somebody that does a virtuous act, and a person who is virtuous. He makes a distinction. He gives 3 reasons. What are they to why that distinction is so important? Why is it important to be able to discern between a person that does a virtuous act and a person who is virtuous? What are these 3 reasons?
Oh,
The reason they're doing it, for one thing.
Right actions done for wrong, that's right. Right actions done for wrong reasons do not build the internal quality or character called virtue. You can do the right thing,
Mhm.
but if it's done for the right reason, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are growing virtuous. You just happen to do it, but for the wrong reason. What's the second one? This is important even today. God doesn't want simple obedience to a set of rules. He wants a specific sort of person. You can obey, 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 obey all you want. And I can do it too. But in the end, God wants our heart. God wants us, all of us. Yes, he wants our obedience, but he wants a specific sort of person as well. Now, what's the final one? Are you finding it there?
The last paragraph.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Sharon found it. What do virtues have? They have value beyond this life. They prepare us for the deep, strong, unshakable kind of happiness God intends for us. Okay, so those are three reasons why it's important to make a distinction between.
Just a question.
No, go ahead, please.
If C.S. Lewis has said that we're going, if we go and live on forever, and we're constantly developing,
Uh-huh.
and with all these characteristics that God would want us to have to be in heaven, do we therefore make our own hell?
that did seem to be implied.
That seems to be implied. Need to read The Great Divorce. He says it's a parable, it's an allegory, it's an idea of what happens at the end between heaven and hell, but yeah, I won't spoil it, but he seems to imply that we tend to make our own hell.
We do on earth.
Our choices.
It's an interesting conversation. It really is. I honestly, true, I prefer that to the images of
Dante.
Dante. Yeah, thank you. I prefer that to Dante's Inferno, which really has informed how when we read the New Testament, Dante has has actually pillaged, has taken over when we read Jesus, well, how we read heaven. It just is. You know, Gehenna is a trash dump. Jesus says, and that was actually where he was crucified. That's where most of the crucifix, a trash dump right outside Jerusalem, where the bodies of crucified victims were simply piled onto it and burned if they weren't claimed or whatever. But yeah, I mean, there's an idea, but we can. That's a good conversation. Maybe I need to preach on that at some point.
That could be your last sermon.
Well, I would say the hell is elders meetings, but that's not here nor there. I just thought I'd throw that out there. But anyway, all
You
right.
know that purgatory is in the Bible.
I know that. It's elders meetings. No, anyway. No, all right. No, all right, here we go. That's being recorded, but I'll be careful who I send it to, Crystal. Okay, all right, there we go. All right, so now, let's do this one. So the last thing for this chapter, we'll move on to chapter.
Right.
There's some more common biblical names for the cardinal virtues, like prudence to me would be wisdom. Wisdom, the biblical name for that. Temperance, using 1 Peter 2:16 as an example, I believe that a biblical word for temperance is self-control. Peter says, act as free men and do not use your freedom as a covering for evil, but use it as bond slaves of God. So justice, I think righteousness, rightness, really that word rightness is what it means, being right in right relationship with rightness. Righteousness and fortitude, John, you said it, perseverance. I think that's okay. All right, we're tracking so far. All right, cool.
You may be able to get to another chapter.
No, we're just going through these 3 chapters, and we'll move to that next one. All right, so let's talk about social morality. Paragraph 1, Carol, if you're still counting paragraphs over there. Okay.
Oh, that's me.
It's
No,
at
I
the
was
top of the page.
looking, I know,
It's
I
at the
was
top of
looking
the
at,
page. Thank you, John.
I was looking at something else.
What's the first thing to get clear about Christ and Christian social morality?
He says in this department, Christ did not come to preach any brand of new morality.
That's right. Really great moral teachers never introduce new moralities. People are more often in need of reminding, not instructing in what everyone has always known to be right.
Ask any teacher.
Fred B. Craddock once said, people need to be reminded of the Bible. People need to be reminded of that which they already know. One of the highest forms of learning is teaching people what they already know. So that's true. That's true. So I think that's the first thing to get clear. What about the second? Paragraph 2. What's the second thing to get clear? Oh, boy.
Yeah,
boy.
Christianity has not,
As you would have them doing.
has,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it says that Christianity does not have a detailed political program laid out.
right.
It is meant for all men at all times, and the particular program which suited one place or time would not suit another. So it says there is no particular political program that it lays out, although I would say that Jesus was very political. And I can't mention this author because author by the name of Yoder, Y-O-D-E-R. Unfortunately, John Howard Yoder had some moral failings toward the end of his life, but he wrote a very influential book called The Politics of Jesus. He was a Mennonite scholar, taught at Notre Dame with Nouwen and Stanley Hauerwas, but it's still a very influential book, and but it's hard to recommend given some things that you can Google and it's out there. But it's a really solid book. The Politics of Jesus. I would say it was political, but not in the sense of our political systems or things like that. Yeah. All right. So that's the second thing. Third thing, what are the right and wrong? Paragraph 3. What are the right and wrong ways the church ought to give us a lead? I like this question. What are the right and wrong ways the church ought to give us a lead to make society better? It's the right way, he says. The church should give us a lead. Paragraph 3.
You mean the whole body of practicing Christ? The
Yeah,
whole
it
body.
involves the whole body of practicing Christians. The
Mhm.
use of specific talents by those who have them. The wrong way is for the clergy to initiate some kind of political movement.
Yes.
Mhm.
I want to go back to question 2, because there was an example here. Something that Lewis said about the second thing that we needed to get clear. He says, we're not given a specific political agenda for social morality any more than we're given lessons in cookery to feed the poor, or a Greek Hebrew lexicon with which to read scripture.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, we just don't get that there. All right, let's move on to question 4. Lewis says the New Testament hints at what a fully Christian society would look like, and then he calls it a leftist, obedient, and cheerful society. Now, why would or wouldn't you want to live in a society like this? Now, let me give you some more information. He doesn't go into details, okay? He just says what a fully Christian society might look like. It would be more like what we now call leftist, with no parasites, okay? Those who don't work, but who expect to eat. That's the first thing.
Mhm.
No silly luxuries and no sillier advertisements to persuade us to buy them. He says it would be obedient to proper government authorities. Husbands, sorry, ladies, he even said, sorry, gals, but
No problem.
husbands, okay, ouch. I'd say wives too, but there you go. Husbands to the wives. Paul did. Paul didn't just say, wives, be obedient to your husbands. He said, husbands, love your wife the way that Christ loved the church. And that's an important part of that. It also says parents. It would also be cheerful. It would be obedient. It would be cheerful, full of rejoicing, with worry and anxiety regarded as wrong. Am I willing to give up all my hard-earned luxuries to be 100% obedient to all human authority and to parade around in phony cheerfulness when I'm feeling down? I think that's what he's talking about. But what about you? Why would or wouldn't you be nice? Why would or wouldn't you want to live in a society like that?
If everyone could live under those principles, it would be fair and just. And that would be okay. But not everybody does. We have thieves and people who don't do their fair share and expect more than their fair share. We have people who work very hard and at the end reap what they have sown. But we have people who have not reaped
Or even sowed.
or even sown.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, haven't even sown and expect to reap more than the hard worker.
Yeah, and Jesus, I think Jesus falls right in line with that. I mean, he told that terrible story about the landowner who went out and started getting people at 6 o'clock in the morning. And he even went out at 5 o'clock and got these low lifes who've been standing around all day and
Watching
hadn't been
everybody
doing
work.
anything. What are you doing standing here? But listen to what they say. Nobody hired us. We've been here all day ready to work, and nobody hired us. Well, you come and I'll pay you what's right. So then he ended up giving them the same thing he gave the poor boys that got there at 6 o'clock in the morning. And when the poor boys at 6 o'clock got to the pay window, they were ticked off. And the landowner looks at them and says, what's your problem? I gave you what I told you I was going to give you. And hey, this is mine anyway. So don't I have the right to give to whoever I want, regardless of how much they've sown, how
Yeah.
much they've reaped?
That is
I mean, I
very-
hate to bring Jesus into this discussion.
Well, that is very true, but God's does have the right for it. But the worker that worked, let's say the hour,
Yeah,
really would have been in the wrong if he had said, hey, look, just because you hired me, I expect as much as the guy that worked all day.
No, true. But he
If it's
did.
given from God, that's different than being, I want more from you because
Ah,
I'm equal.
I got you. That's good. That's why we're talking about it. Anybody else want to jump into this pool?
The main thing I see here is that for this type of society, everybody has to be happy with what they have.
Mhm.
And they think of the other guy before they think of themselves.
Right.
And that's,
Amen.
that's how we should be.
And that's a Christian society.
Yes.
Right. And that's, yeah, so that's great. Good stuff. All right.
But greed always takes hold.
Either that or fear, because I'm looking at this statement regarding worry or anxiety as
Go ahead.
wrong.
Mm,
Is that if the person is individually worried and scared, where is the wrong? Is the wrong in the society for not upholding that person, trying to take that worry and fear from them? Or we are fearful creatures.
That's good.
I
Go ahead, buddy.
think it's a moot point until the kingdom is fully established here on earth.
I miss-
All of the three monolithic faiths have tried to have a religious goal. They all have failed
Yes.
horribly.
yes.
You know, the Jews tried it. They got no success out of it.
Right.
The Christians tried it.
We know.
They've got no success out of it. The Muslims are still trying it around the world. They're not getting any success out of it either. You're right. So you could say that they all had good intentions
Yes.
in doing it, but the fact of the matter is just not gonna happen. And it's to me, a waste of time to even talk about the possibilities of it here. It will happen when God wants it to happen and not one nanosecond prior to that.
I have to agree.
So we, as individuals, then I have to ask this stupid question of, should we just give up trying to be Christian? I mean, even though we can't have a society like that.
There's a
Just-
difference
Just give
between,
up and put our stake in whatever worldly system.
But that goes back to the beginning of this
All
chapter,
right.
which is, I think it's number 2.
Yes.
Of course, it could be number 3, where you have to deal with what's going on within the individual.
That's right.
And maintain good functioning within the individual.
Yeah.
And
much
that-
as you were
that's
able.
what
I think the message from Christ is obviously you have to try to live your life as if this situation exists.
Yeah. It's good.
Doesn't mean you have to live your life with the expectation that it's going to be that way
That's true.
before it comes back.
That's true.
You know, it's good. I think a good example happened with the Kleins and Tuggles a couple of weeks ago, where we had somebody soliciting funds. We both had reservations,
Right.
but we both gave to the person.
Yeah.
And in spite of the reservation, and it was strange, John and I, when we did this separately.
Yeah,
we-
right.
You know,
we didn't know.
I didn't know he had done it. He didn't know that I'd done it.
I got you.
And then when we talked about it, we used the same term, was that if she wasn't sincere, then that's on her.
Right.
Exactly.
It's good.
And
That's
so that doesn't mean, because we had that one bad experience, that the next person that we come across, we're gonna say no.
That's
Right,
right.
true, because
That's
it's on them.
That's true.
Exactly.
And so you just, it's the same thing happened, I think, Jesus wasn't just rejected and crucified there at the end. He was rejected all along.
Oh, yeah, he was.
Mhm.
Yeah, he was.
But did that mean that the only thing that appears to have changed?
Yeah.
With his ministry was that initially he tended not to say that the message was for Gentiles.
Right, that's right. He did.
Because he definitely
That's right.
told the one woman,
He did.
definitely told the one woman
Yep.
that it was not to pearls, to for swine or
Yeah.
something. And then she said, dogs gotta eat too or something.
That's right, yeah.
Even the little dogs get
But-
scraps
Scratch
from
the
the table.
crumbs.
Right, so we are definitely supposed to live our lives as if that is gonna be the way things are. But not live our lives because it has to be that way or we're gonna change. That's right.
Well, let's,
I- I'm sorry.
no, it's fine.
um, On the reaping and sowing part, I
Sure.
think it goes back to Jesus's thing about to some much has been given,
That's true.
and to those that have been given much, much is expected.
Exactly.
It's
You
excellent.
know, you reap what you sow, but at the same time, if you reap a lot, you are responsible then to help those who cannot.
That's right. That's
And
right.
not make a judgment call on what,
Exactly. And like Hoyt said, it's on them if they,
If they were being deceitful.
Well, his parables were really, some of them very hard.
Yeah.
The garden is certainly one that's hard for us to accept, but hiring the laborers.
Yeah, it's
Also, the story of the talents
That's, yeah,
is
very,
extremely difficult.
yes, it
And
is.
because it says there, your master reaped where he had not sown.
Yeah, that's right.
And there was no judgment on the master.
Nope.
Whatsoever.
That's right.
words are
And
used.
there's the
No judgment.
servant who was called and about to be discharged
Mm.
because he was pick a
Right.
word.
Yeah.
But he went ahead to everybody who owed money and said, well, you just pay half and we'll call it even.
That's right. And he was commended for his shrewdness. That's one of the difficult ones, big difficult ones. That's good. All right.
Embezzlement.
Well, we'll just touch on this one more time on question 5. Heathen Greeks, Old Testament Jews, and Christians of the Middle Ages were all against one kind of economic system. We talk about the economic system is based on lending money with interest to provide, and this is paragraph 6.
Mhm.
It's based on lending money with interest to provide capital for others to work, start businesses, and that's what we call capitalism.
Mhm.
Pros of capitalism, pros of capitalism. Stimulates production and economic growth, obviously. Both for the individual and his money. Both the individual and his money are working. When capitalism is at its best, that's what it does. Stimulates production and economic growth. Both the individual and his money are working. Cons can be, it causes sometimes this idea, folks, of keeping up with the Joneses, and it gives worries about the future. And that's a con of capitalism. That's not, it's but that's just one of then they, but capitalism, it is what we have. I mean, but so, and that's all I'm gonna say on that, because I don't know anything about economics.
The biggest problem with capitalism,
Yes, sir.
it does do all of those things.
Yes, sir.
And we can take, for example, Wall Street.
Yeah.
Wall Street, most of us is full of crooks and thieves.
Okay.
And they pretty much are. However, if you're gonna have a capitalistic society, nobody has allocated capital better than Wall Street.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they get their pound of flesh right off the top, sometimes 2 or 3 pounds of
Right,
flesh.
right.
But it still allocates capital. But the real problem with capitalism is that in the end, those who have will have more, and those who don't have will have
Yes.
Yeah.
is the end result. And so what we've done over the years is we've tried to create rules, and regulations to get away from that. If we think things are inequality exists now, you should have gone back to the 19th century.
Yeah, right.
Oh, true.
And if you thought it was bad then, you
Right.
should have gone back to the 18th.
You're right.
You know, so as it's come forward, it has improved some, but you can't make enough rules and regulations to stop the inevitable that those who've got are gonna have more, those who don't. Now, are they exceptions to that rule? Of course. Yeah, but that's what the whole thing flows to. And we're seeing right now, during the pandemic, billionaire class gained $1 trillion. Their way. Non-billionaire class lost.
Yeah.
During the pandemic. Most people were worse off at the end of the pandemic than they were before. Now, not everybody, but most
Right.
people really were.
I wouldn't
Yeah,
know
you're right.
anything about that billionaire stuff.
I'm with you, Peggy.
And
I can't even
unfortunately,
comprehend.
with capitalism being what it is, and I recognize all the things that you did, the other forms of government that have been tried,
Mm,
unfortunately, the same greed exists in man.
mm.
So then the idea of communism or socialism was everybody given according to their needs. The only problem is the ruling class needed more.
Yes. As my little brother said, the name of the governments may change, but the structure remains the same. In Russia, you had the aristocracy and the peasants.
Right.
So then you had the Communist Party and the peasants.
You're always going to have the peasants, unfortunately. You're always going to have the rulers or
Mhm.
whatever.
Right.
And they get there because they crave power. And if you have power, you crave
Agreed.
But that's only if you believe in their version of power.
Right.
true.
That's true.
And if you don't,
True that.
But I'll say one other thing at that point. It's amazing. You can have two brothers, not twins, but as close to one birth as the other one, say
Sure.
a year apart. Have two brothers in a family that's a farm family, and they're satisfied with the simpler things of life. They enjoy their life. They have a good life. It's not a dysfunctional family. Everything is fine. And you got one brother who wants to go out and create a lot of wealth and go with that. And then the other brother says, no, I'm fine right here. I'm happy getting up, rooster crows. I'm happy going to bed when the sun goes down, you know, and I'm fine and I'm happy. And they're two peas out of the same pot,
Yeah, right.
but they're that different.
Yeah, that's true.
And so that's, if you could reconcile that, then you could reconcile hopefully. Yeah. But we all know instances of that.
and sometimes the one that gains the wealth ends up the less happy.
Right. Yeah.
There's
More money, more
the
problems, right?
poem, Richard Cory.
Oh, yeah.
Who wrote the poem, Richard Cory?
Not sure.
I thought that was the
One of our
Beatles.
great 1700 authors, I guess, or 1800. Richard Cory lives in the big house up on the hill. Everybody down here in the village, he wears a top hat and tails and comes down, and everybody, he back up there every night. Everybody down here wishes they were Richard Cory.
Mm.
One morning they go up there, Richard Cory put a gun to his head and on his brains.
They didn't want to be Richard Cory anymore.
Right.
And we'll end the chapter here with a discussion about giving. Whether we give a man a fish, you know, you've heard this, give a man a fish, give a man a fishing pole and teach him to fish. Giving or charity remains one of our moral duties today as Christians. What does Lewis say is the only safe rule? This is paragraph 7. For giving, and what for many of us is the great obstacle. What is the only safe rule?
Give until it hurts.
The
Yeah.
obstacle is pride.
The obstacle is pride.
And fear of insecurity
Fear
too.
of insecurity. Yeah, fear of insecurity. Let me read this paragraph to you here. Giving to the poor is an essential part of Christian morality, but some people feel instead of giving to the poor, we should be producing a society in which there are no poor. While the latter is very desirable, anyone who thinks he can stop giving in the meantime has parted from Christian morality. How much are we to give? Lewis replies, the only safe rule is to give more than we can spare. For many of us, the great obstacle to charity lies not in our luxurious living, but in our fear of insecurity.
Amen.
It's interesting.
I find it
Yeah.
amazing that he's writing, and I know in the 40s during the time of World War II, how many of his statements hit home exactly today.
Mhm.
Your Christianity.
That kind of gives a focus that what he's telling is pretty accurate,
Mhm.
because it was way different in World War II era than it is today.
And right before the Great Depression.
Mhm.
That's right.
Well, I think what we see is that human nature
Hasn't
has
changed
never
that
changed.
much. It hasn't changed.
And what we do is we tend to look back on our immediate history, those years right behind us, and say those were the best.
Oh, yes.
Our
Only because we
grandfathers-
survived.
Yeah.
Only
Yeah,
because we
there you
survived.
go.
Right. Our grandfathers thought that the generation following them, everything had gone to hell in a handbasket.
Oh, yes.
My father thought my generation had gone to hell.
Yeah, yeah.
And now we
And
think
now we think
this
the same
generation.
thing.
Well, but I don't. I really don't. I think I meet more young people today that are better people. I meet very few young people that I don't think are better than the people I grew up with.
I'm gonna have to hang out with you to see these people, because I go up to a counter and a price tag of, let's say, $1.27. And I hand them 27, if I'm getting back $1.27. If I hand them the correct change, they don't know what to do because it doesn't come up on the cash register.
But that's
No,
not
if you hand-
character.
if you hand
That's not character.
Extra
thing.
change. they don't-
That's why they created the cash registers, that they put in how much you give them, and it tells them how much to give you back.
They couldn't.
I have found the process of thinking is getting less and less.
Yes.
Well, I think what they think about it may be different.
It's their
You
cell
may be
phones.
right, but
It's their cell
dependent on the
phones. They can
computer.
do them
They're
themselves.
I
dependent on the
can't name you
computers.
a young person. I can't name you a young person that I think is not a better person than most of the young people.
You hung up with Ron
Yeah,
Brown.
but it was ordinary folks. I do.
What way do you think they're a better person than they were?
I think that most of the people that I know today have a heightened sense
Bless you.
of fair play. I think fair play, which we covered back up here, and is in chapter 1, that most young people today have a much better sense of fair play. than young people do.
We grew up in two different neighborhoods.
Yeah, definitely. I fear that there is more of a thought of, what is that called?
The me generation.
Well, it's the me generation, but they feel they are owed that it's a, darn, there's a word for it.
Entitled.
Entitled. They're entitled nobody's entitled to anything.
That's right.
Most people have to earn what they've got. And
But
I'm saying, help those in need. Fine. But those in need have to try to help themselves too. And when you start giving everything, they don't, why would I want to go and get a job? I'm making more money sitting at home. And
that
that's
started,
the
yes.
way I'm seeing it today.
That's one of the things we saw about the welfare state. But I grew up, along with maybe some of you, hopefully, in the late 50s, early 60s, at the height of the civil rights.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And at that time, it was not about me. It was about that other person.
I tell you what, dude. Get you a notebook somewhere and draw a page or say 2 pages. And on one page, write the names of the people that you know that are feeling entitled, don't want to work, don't want to do all of that. And on another page, write the names of the people you know who are not that way. And then come back and tell me how many names you have on each page.
I don't think that the kids today see more in fair play. I think they're more into the social justice than we were, because that's seems to be what's being taught in the schools nowadays, more social justice and how people were treated and how that was wrong and things of that nature. I think the kids today, a lot of the stuff that's going on, even if they got a job, they can't get out on their own. They can't make enough money to afford an apartment. They've got to live with 3 or 4 other people in an apartment to be able to pay the bills.
Yep.
Or they got to live at home. And I mean, they may go out and work every day, and then you've got, you still got a lot of problems with drugs and things like that that's going on in this country. But I don't think it's that they believe more in fair play. It's just that they're brought up more on the social justices and
Which is part of fair.
But I got my
Yeah.
social justice in church. So
We haven't
I'm
kicked you out
glad
yet.
to see it being in school too.
We haven't kicked you out yet.
But am I the only one here that grew up in a multi-generational home?
Probably, you might be.
You may be. Or
When I was
you
young,
did, Carol.
Yeah, I did.
I
My
did.
maternal grandmother lived with us.
Yeah,
for-
you did.
when I was young, about every other house you go to, and of course it took a half a mile to get to the next house.
Yeah, right.
But almost every house or every other house had multi-generational families.
Well, maybe that might be why we have such different views on a lot of things, because my closest relative, I lived in Miami, Florida, and the closest relative of any sort was in Wichita, Kansas, and the other grandmother was in California.
So
And I
your
saw
friends
them
and
maybe.
neighbors were more family than your
One of the
family.
reasons they lived together was because they couldn't afford
Mhm.
individual residence.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's always been.
Besides that, it took
That's
all the
still
kids
is.
to milk the cows.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, you needed all those
All right.
kids to tend the farms. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, well, okay, so that's the first 3 chapters of Christian morality.
I think it's important to this whole thing is that if you have the new woke, it's 87, I don't know what paragraph it is, it says, most of us are not really approaching the subject in order to find out what Christianity says. We are approaching it in the hope of finding support from Christianity for the views of our own party.
That's right.
Very good.
That's right. He's right. That hasn't changed in a very long time and probably never will.
No.
And we're looking
Oh,
for an
sure.
ally,
That's back there.
not a
in Acts.
master or a judge, is what Lewis says.
Mhm.
We want an ally. Yeah.
He
So,
also says the Christian society is not going to arrive until most of us really want it.
well, that's true.
Mhm.
I mean, that's true.
We all want
All
to go in
right,
the same
all
direction.
right. I'm
Thank
going
Christ,
to
That's the
end
only
our
time
time
I've been
today.
sick
We'll
before.
finish up chapters 4, 5, and 6 for next week of book 3. Thank you all very, very much. God bless you. Have a good lunch. Miss Crystal, farewell, and Miss Rose, see ya.
And I'm going into the bathroom, into my physical